Welcome, everyone, to the Lighter Mind podcast. In the Lighter Mind, we explore spirituality, personal growth, trauma, recovery, and the path to wholeness. The Lighter Mind podcast is not intended to diagnose or treat any forms of mental illness. We are not licensed therapists unless otherwise noted, and these are experiential conversations. Hello, and welcome back to the Lighter Mind podcast. Today, I wanted to tackle some shadow work, and Crow has turned me on to something that I've been using with my clients. That it's a YouTube channel that we're going to try to link in the description for this so that people can get like a really good idea of what we're actually talking about. But it's diving into shadow work and how it shows up in modern cinema, most particularly how it shows up in The Dark Knight and Fight Club, and then what's the other one? Black Swan. And
Black Swan.
I've been the Black Swan one, which is very cool. But I've been introducing this into my curriculum, and I've been learning a little bit myself about some of the stuff, because this is the concept of shadow work is from Carl Jung, and the whole basis of it is that we have conscious parts of ourselves that are, I guess, deemed as socially acceptable, and then we have unconscious parts of ourselves that we tend to hide in the shadows, metaphorically speaking, that we tend to reject. Those are parts of us that are not as socially acceptable. So it's anger and some fear and some shame and guilt and some of these things that can kind of create problems in society a little bit and create internal turmoil and all. So I wanted to talk about, for one, I wanted to pass it over to you, Crow, and I wanted to get like your idea, because you're the one who actually turned me on to this. And for the listeners, the YouTube channel that we're probably going to be referencing a lot is called the Modern Intuitionist. And I wanted to hear, Crow, how you got into this and what, how does that show up within your clientele, and how do they respond to it, and what does shadow work look like for you guys?
Wow. Well, first off, I stumbled onto that on a YouTube channel, which was just a gift, because it really, I was looking for a way to explain to clients that it's not out of the realm of their understanding. In fact, it's very much right in their face. And in this world of cinema that we live in, we're after all the bells and whistles and all the bullets flying and yada yada. But every single writer that creates these masterpieces in Hollywood take different aspects and components, and they really invite you into what it means to essentially be human, to figure yourself out at a deeper level. And the texture of each one of these films that we're watching that are masterpieces, we're seeing and reading different things into them. And metaphorically, there's different layers that we're piercing. And I can't tell you how many times I've showed the the episode of the Fight Club, and the client's reaction is typically always, I had no idea that's what it was about. I thought it was about something completely different. And it really helps to further that point of doing that work. And I always start in the residential, the provisional sort of work to this is that movie in my spirituality and recovery group. Is I always start with that Finding Joe documentary, which lays it out in a very simplistic form, and it's just beautiful the way that it explains who Campbell was and what the whole process was. And he quotes Jung, he quotes Nietzsche, and there's, but the deep dive is the really harder stuff to get into with with perhaps PHP classes. And to I guess it further elaborates the point of that I'm trying to make with them, is that you're going to have to do that work, whether you like it or not. Um, but I think the big piece to the whole thing is that we don't linger in there, but we study it. And it's really comes down to what I've found is questions. Are we asking the right questions? What am I missing? What am I missing? And I'm missing the right questions that I've been asking myself my whole life. And so fundamentally, I think that's at the root of it. Because as much as we want to do that deep dive exploration on our soul, on our psyche, and get to the heart of it, I think that the books that Alan's turned me on to for sure about shadow work um, is is really the best way to come at it, I think, because they're asking you questions you don't ask yourself, and you need something to sort of crack that proverbial egg at the beginning of your journey to be asking those. And yeah, therapists do, but are they always asking the right questions? Are they asking the questions that, as you're sitting alone in your own, by yourself, writing out answers, are you are those the questions that have been asked in this life, or anyone taught you to ask of yourself? So it's a different way of really delving into it, I think, is what it's helped clients understand, is really to reframe our story moving forward. You have to understand what you're running from. And that's pretty much what I think they've all kind of come to realize through that work. What have your
Mm.
clients found in it?
Yeah, that story piece is huge, and that is a pretty big motif throughout those videos, is talking about the story and talking about the contaminating event and talking about how that alters the course of the story. And so I want to back that up a little bit. So the one of the things that they introduce in those videos is talking about how we share our story as mini episodes. And I think it was called episodic memory.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that they were talking about was how we tend to have some type of contaminating event that happens usually at the beginning of our story. And the way that I interpret that contaminating event is some type of highly emotional, usually traumatic experience that kind of taints what the rest of the story actually looks like for us. I mean, kind of as PTSD does, is, kind of goes in there and rewires some of the neural pathways, and it's is harmful. Okay. But when we're at a place of trying to dig into some of this, I guess, shadow work, I really started to get introduced to it or introduced to it when I started to work through some of that, like, contaminating things that were happening in my story. So going back to some of the childhood stuff and figuring out, okay, am I still living through the same experience over and over again, which is kind of one of the things that contaminating event does. And how the process of resentment works is that if we don't go back and look at life in retrospect and dig into some of those things, they can continue to influence how we show up in our life, which is problematic, because it's almost like, I think about it as like Groundhog's Day. It's like we're living the same day over and over again, You know, we're having the same experiences, we're having the same preconditioned responses to things, and we're not necessarily seeing life the way that it is. We're almost seeing life the way that it actually was at some point. At least that was my experience with it. And when I was able to go back to, I guess, that like contaminating event, or there was a few, and there's usually a few of them in everyone's life, and I was able to untether some of that stuff, that's where I was able to move from a place of victimhood to a place of being kind of a survivor, which is another one of the things that they talk about in the video, which is where, as opposed to having like this contaminating event, it's almost like this redemptive story.
Hmm. Hmm. That's it. That's totally it. And so it's the ability to go back and see it for what it is, exactly what it is, not the narrative that I put around it. So I can look back at my past. I did the same work where I'm going back, looking at all those contaminating events, quotes, um, and it's given you the ability to reframe it, to see it for exactly what it is. But then with that, it's the ability then to reframe the contamination story into the redemptive story moving forward, is to understand the patterns of my reaction, my response. And so so now I'm looking at almost a two-part thing as we go back and look at it. This is exactly what happened. Now I can start to look at the characters involved in all of that so-called damage. And then I can start to see it for exactly what it is. But now I'm looking at myself, and I'm looking at my response and how those patterns of the response is now what shaped me moving forward. Rather, I should say it really shaped and spoke to my nervous system of what I
Mm.
and helped determine the world that I was shaping, trying to move forward and grow up, right? If that makes any sense. So it's the ability to
Mm.
go back, reframe, and look at it exactly as is, without the emotional charge. And you use that word untethered. So by becoming untethered, it's to see it for what it was, which was not as bad as I thought it was. And in that uh, film that you showed your clients, the Dark Knight, for example, the Joker always reappears telling a different story about his scars throughout the movie, right? And he's always
Mm.
asking people in the movie, "You want to know how I got these scars?" And each time that he tells that story, it's a different story depending on the audience. So we do the exact same thing. We're retelling our story depending on the environment through the years as we grow older and older, further solidifying its hold on us as a reaffirmation of who I am. So almost inadvertently, I'm reaffirming to my nervous system, this is who I am. We don't do this. We shouldn't do that. Crow doesn't do this, because I'm reaffirming that same reaction response, right? And the only way to
Mm.
break through that is to go all the way back to the shadow, to dig that little boy up and reframe the whole entire narrative. That is which
Mm.
leads us to the redemption story. Part of it is now I have a different meaning in why it happened. It didn't happen to me, it happened for me. And so now I'm jumping out of victim state, and I'm into, all right, it's mine, and what am I going to do with it moving forward? But it was simply
Mm,
a response. Now, around that response, I have led a life that is filled with shame, guilt from the response, when in all reality, that was a little boy's nervous system doing what it had to do to, to survive. And that component stays with us in the shadow self. And I still push that away and push that away. And I know no other way to respond in my life other than that 5-year-old boy. So I'm going to escape. I'm going to run. I'm going to hide. I'm going to close down. I'm going to go into fawn. I'm going to do all those same things that I did when I was 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, 9 years old, because that is the trained, learned response, and that equals safety. Now, if I get into anything that's more as I grow through life and without realizing it and challenging that and becoming vulnerable, becoming open, becoming more honest, leading a really healthy, good life, that now registers as unsafe. And so I'm not going to be willing to take risks, get into healthy relationships, take on new jobs, new adventures in life. I'm only going to grow as much as my child shadow self will allow me without becoming aware of it.
mm,
Right.
mm.
For example,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
realized that when I sobered up, I really had to step back alone and look at myself and what I had done through my 20, probably 15, 20 years of drinking, if I had to be honest, 20 years, is that I had self inflicted myself with so much more trauma than was ever there in the first place. But I realized that what alcohol gave me was the ability to run, hide, avoid, escape. All of those were the exact same reaction that my nervous system had when I was 3 years old, when both parents shot out of my life, right? They became bad characters, and I lived with a contamination story. Well, you drink if you had my parents. You drink if you had my upbringing. I was emotionally abused. All these other stories that I was telling myself, I had to go back and look at Little Crow and say, no, I'm not carrying shame and guilt for, for, I'm not carrying that. What that is was a response that I had, that I took all of that and as a means of survival. And at the same time, those were the very, very parts of me that were alive, that were creative, that were full of awe, that were full of wonder and mystery. And I left all of those behind. And from that time forward, it just becomes pretty much how do I get out of it? So that is where in my sobriety, I had to go back and look at the characters, really look at them and say, all right. And this also, interestingly enough, was, if not an outright way of forgiveness, it gave me a reframe of understanding because I could see the characters not as uh, demonic. Mom and dad were doing the best they could. They were children themselves. So I had to place myself into the characters, the people, the places, shoes, right? And going back to last week's podcast and what Alan was talking about, that rule that everybody is doing the best they can with what they have and what they know. And so there was no ill intent in the past. What I was framing as shame and guilt was simply my response mechanism to make sense of it, to go forward. So by doing that shadow work, I could untether myself from the emotional charge it held over me, and I could it landed me with right with the ability to reframe it and then pull myself out of victimhood and say, all right, this is really what happened. And this is who I am in good measure as a result of that. So, but I'm glad that you're
Mhm.
showing the modern institutionist to your clients, because in every single
Yeah, I
movie, I mean, that Dark Knight, and to the other part of that Dark Knight, they point out that it's not a linear business that we're doing here. This is, what Carl Jung described as circumambulation. Everything moves in circles. And we have to repeat the same experiences in different ways and come back to them. Same relationships, same old addiction problems, whatever it is, we have to do that in order to level up each time, because there's something within our
Mhm.
experience field that we haven't mastered yet. We're not getting the message. So, and we're not asking the right questions right out of the gate. It's because if I'm not asking them, then I don't know them, because my calibration of I haven't adapted to a new way, a new means of a neurological reset protocol yet, and I haven't taken that on. So each time I'm starting to ask new questions, and I'm gaining a higher degree of knowledge and wisdom through each experience. But there's kind of no way out of that. This is life, and it is like a video game, and it is leveling up. Did your clients get to that where they kind of realize that, Kyle, as they were watching this, that it is so similar to a video game, only there's not instant reward?
not Not necessarily. I think most of the things that the biggest thing that comes up every time I show it is the contaminating events and their ability to ruminate and to be able to
Mhm.
sit in their issues. But then at the same time, like the other thing that happens is with that contaminating event, I would say almost 80% of the clients that I show this stuff to is I talk about how when we have that contaminating event, we are anticipating the other shoe dropping. Okay. Because
Mhm.
our past has told us that bad things happen and bad things can happen often. We are anticipating that next bad thing to happen. And what I think this is a pretty ubiquitous issue, but I think addicts and alcoholics or people in recovery, I think they relate to a little bit more about our ability to self-destruct. So if we are
Mhm.
anticipating that next bad thing happening, if it doesn't happen, we're going to take control of the situation and make it happen. And so we almost,
Correct.
the and I yeah, the clients they relate to that almost more than anything about that's it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's exactly what it is. It's I'm expecting this bad thing to happen and I would rather do it on my terms. I would rather self-destruct so that it's I'm not being short side, I'm not being tackled to the ground by some random event in life. And that I that is one of the biggest topics. The other thing that we talk a lot about is or the other thing that gets brought up for them is in the Fight Club when they're talking about like the shadow projection and they're talking about the collective shadow and they're talking about like one of the questions that I ask them after the Fight Club one, I'm like, I want you guys to think about some type of behavior that you see someone else do that pisses you off. Okay. Something that just
Mhm.
kind of irks you when they do that, whether they're being inconsiderate or they're being, I don't know, procrastinating or they're being lazy or something like that. And they can all like vividly picture someone. And then I ask them, when's the last time you showed up in your life like that? And all of them are like, well, shit. Because it's like realistically when we're talking about like this projection, it's like the external world is usually an internal reflection of ourselves. And so
Mhm.
if we are able to pick up on those irritating qualities that we see in someone else, it's usually because there's part of us that can relate to that internal quality and it's unhealed in us in some way. And that tends to like every single client, they're like, oh, damn it. Like you're right. Like I
L-
tend to
I
procrastinate or I'm lazy or I do something like that.
I love it. I love it. And to both
Mhm.
points of those, the first one is the self-destructive behavior that we're going to do. The clients, my clients did the exact same thing. They caught on to that right away because we talked about that um, the self contamination, and the
Mhm.
ability to ruminate because you don't have the key yet. You haven't found the key to unlock the door out of the rumination room. And so you're not getting out of that
Mhm.
because you're not asking the right questions and you don't know them. So it's like, okay, wait a minute. Let's slow the frame. If my world is all in my head, I'm creating this. What am I not seeing? And it's to further gain control. It's to gain control, just to stay in control, even if the result is bad, horrible every time. I'm glad that your clients picked up on that. That's beautiful. The second part is that what were you saying in
Mhm.
the second part again? After you're waiting for
So
the
we're
other shoe to
talking about
drop.
the shadow projection.
Yes, the
Oh, the waiting for
projection.
the other shoe to drop. Talking about the shadow
Yeah,
projection. Yep,
and
yep, yep.
in rumination, it's not waiting for it if it might. We're going to make it just as you had said, and that gives us a sense of dominance and control over the situation. And we're completely unaware that we're doing that. And we're just going to continue to do that until you can find the key to that escape room and get out of that to that next level to where you are looking at thoughts rather than through them. So, yeah, that's beautiful. I like that.
Mhm. What do you got, Alan?
Well, I think Kyle, you were saying how things that anger you that other people do. So years ago, I read an article that most things that piss you off are things that you actually do.
Mhm.
So if you see a behavior in someone else and it pisses you off, it's most likely reflection on you more than on them. So I think that um, is pretty important. And I also, the whole time you guys have been talking, I'm sitting there and you're talking about asking the questions and being aware. And seriously, how many people are going to ever ask the question? No one's going to be like, why am I so screwed up? Ever. Like, how many, the three of us have asked that and we're still screwed up. Hate to say it,
Mhm.
but I would say 99% of people don't go through life, having some kind of, existential question and like, why am I so messed up? They just go through life like just paddling along in the shit stream, and they're not aware, I mean, I hate to sound like the cynic here, but I really struggle with the thought that anyone's like, wow, why am I such a mess? And then, granted, we've all done the self help book stuff, but how many people actually do the work? Like you read the book and you think, oh, I read The Road Less Traveled when I was 18 and now I'm just great. But you're not. You're a mess. Like I see it every day. I look around, I'm like, these people are a mess. So, um, that said, I've only seen one of these three movies. I'm not a movie guy really.
Mhm.
I saw the Fight Club like 20 years ago, probably. Um, so there, yeah. And maybe I saw Black Swan. I don't think so. And the Batman or whatever it is, Dark Knight, I've never seen. So I'm kind of out of the loop on the movie
Just a damn party
parable.
pooper,
Well,
Alan, you know?
well,
I know, man. I'm
well,
just raining on everyone's parade today.
I, I love it.
No,
I
no,
love
I
it
think
though,
so. I
because
think you
what
make a
All right, somebody, please.
now we have a
okay.
little bit of a delay in the
Well,
video right here, and so we're
well,
getting caught up on each other.
I thought you were going to speak there, Kyle, but to
Go
that
for it, Crow.
projection point, that projection is clutch. There's two ways that your shadow is going to bite you. Is one is that you're completely unaware of it because you don't even try. You're not taking responsibility. And the other one is if you do know and you're ignoring it and you're not taking any responsibility. And to the cultural aspect of that, we see what happens, and Jordan Peterson talked about this at length. We see what happens to a culture where nobody takes responsibility for themselves and can go down in there and wrestle with those demons. And so you live a life like a sheep, and then you become the most socially malleable uh, 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 sheep in the world, and you're willing to go along with anything that you're told. And we can see down through the annals of history what results we get with that in Nazi Germany and on. It's a sickness. It's a cultural sickness and a virus, but it stems from a people that don't take responsibility for themselves and for their own universe. It's you all along. It's you, and that is that I think is the crux is of what the beauty all of these movie makers, these screenwriters are trying to get through to you beyond all the cinematic explosions and all the wonderful effects. There, at the heart of it is always going to be the hero's journey, a story to tell you to do your work, take responsibility for yourself, um, because that is the very, very tipping point between the contamination story and the redemption story. And yeah, that's a beautiful thing. It's not easy, but that's where the power lies, because when you go back and you can have the ability to reframe the gift you've been given through all the experiences in your life, they become beautiful. And now you take that forward. So instead of having a world that goes running for I'm triggered, I'm out of here, we've replaced that with you don't have to take any responsibility. We'll get you a trigger room, make it easy on you. So we've spent more time and energy as a culture placating without spending more time in, and this goes back also to the initiation process, right? In the hero's journey. This is integral to every culture on the planet except ours. We don't have to go into the woods when in that transition between boyhood to manhood. Every culture had an initiatory period. For a boy to become a man, he had to go off by himself, go on a vision quest. You see it that resounding in every movie as well. You see that in the movie 300. Leonidas he's given a spear and some water, and it's like, if you come back, awesome, you can become king. But if you don't, then you died. Well, you're wrestling with yourself and your own wits and your own resources, and that will turn you into a man quick. But we don't have that culturally. and
Well,
we're paying the price in a lot of ways.
when was the last time we had that culturally? Come on. So I think what it is, I think it's you're talking actual. I'm metaphorically that we don't even have that. And it's like,
No,
it's a world full of
no.
microaggressions. I remember when I worked at the brewery, there was this girl, and the brewers, we'd just be sitting there having lunch. And every time under her breath, as we were talking, she's like, microaggression, microaggression. And I'm like, you know what? You want aggression? I got it. If there's hate in your heart, let it out. I've got it, lady. You know? So I think what has happened is we're raising a world of pussies. And that's the fucking bottom. I wasn't going to swear, but here I am. It's like, oh, God, I don't want my poor little baby to ever have any hard times in his life. And what they're doing is making a bunch of soy boys that are super soft and they suck. And they're going to make this world terrible. That's what's happening.
Mhm.
Because no one's coming to save you. I tell this to people all the time. Save yourself because no one's there. The world is going to go sideways. The guy on the white horse with the white cape or hat isn't going to come riding in and save your little scarf wearing, little latte drinking butt. You are going to be screwed. So harden up. I tell we used to say it all the time at the brewery. Harden the f up. We get these guys in like, oh, we had to move some tanks, and I can lift one of these tanks by myself. It's maybe 200 pounds. And this kid got a blood blister and he had to go home for the day because he got a blood blister because his hand slipped on the stainless steel. You know, I'm not gonna, boo fucking who, buddy, harden up. So anyhow, I've been thinking about a lot of things lately, and I'm gonna go on a tangent here, but I think the word trauma is way overused. Like everything's a
It is,
trauma now.
yeah.
Like, well, I had a hangnail when I was 4, so now I can't use my hand. I got to get therapy for my trauma from that. Like it devalues the word trauma when we use it
So
that it's everything that might have happened to
Yeah.
you.
Yes.
so what about a
Yes.
highly emotional event? Does that sit better with you, Alan?
Yeah, no, and I get it. I mean, we've had our individual stories where we've talked about the crap we dealt with as children and growing up, and it emotional.
I
And
guess
part of
that
it, I think, is you got a little kid's brain that doesn't really know how to process it, and B, I think a lot of it, especially like with the bowling when I was a kid, I look back and I was like, I was bigger than most of those kids. I could have knocked them into next week if I wasn't so emotionally weak. I was not. I was physically pretty strong, but I was emotionally weak. So, and I think this goes back to this babying this generation. Like, you aren't going to, and I don't think it needs to be abusive. But I think resilience is key to this. Like, yeah, this happened and it's fine. And as a little kid, it's hard to process it. But when you get into your teens, I think it's really hard for me to look back and not shake my head and be like, God, I was a wimp. Like I should have just been a little like, no, screw you. And so, but I'm not denigrating the experiences we've had, not what Crow went through as a child, not what I went through, not what Kyle went through, not what any of our listeners went through. But I don't like it as an excuse, like, well, I can't do this or I can't do that because as a child, this happened to me. Right.
Mhm.
And I think that
Mhm.
that's a lot of people like, and you drank to deal with your thing and be in that mode. And I did all the stuff I did because of that. But I get a little concerned that we're focused too much on like, what happened and it did happen and we need to be focused. We need to look at that and say, all right, ask the question, which goes all the way back to where I started this rant, is that people don't ask the question. They don't
Right.
like say, what happened to me? Why
Right.
am I screwed up? Or instead of saying, all right, so that happened, how do I move beyond this in a healthy, productive way?
to move us right back to the top
Right.
of the hour
Right.
of what this is all about is how do I reframe this story? And it's not, to quote what Anna Lemke talks about in her book, Dopamine Nation, it's not what you say about your past, it's how you say it and how you use that. That is clutch. That is key to reframing your story. We are just storytellers. That's all we are. And that's what movies are trying to invite us into is you're a storyteller. So here, let's create one. But in order for you to create one moving forward, you've got to get beyond all the walls and barriers that are in your psyche, your head. And you have to do that work. And to that piece on trauma, um, also, Kyle, that was a great question. You know, what about a big trauma? Well, that's subjective to the person's experience, right? I mean, I didn't have anything compared to what somebody in some of these Middle East countries that are children that are being bombed, let's say in a war-torn nation. No, nowhere near that. Nowhere near that. It didn't frazzle my, you know, my body in to that degree. It's not to the, but we still we still are affected in our own way. And that is the premise of this whole thing is that we're still carrying those old stories, and the shadow is the way I responded when I was to a 5, 6, 7 year old story. Now I sober up and I was 52 years old, and I finally sat in my apartment one day and went, wow, if I had to be honest with Crow right now, I have about the emotional nervous system of a 12-year-old because I'm doing the same thing and I'm thinking the same thoughts and I feel the same way as I did when I was a little boy. And that is what prompts one to say, okay, this is what bothered me about this person in my past, or this and this and this and this. But it comes down to that responsibility piece you're talking about is take responsibility and say, okay, well, it was projection and it still is to this day. And I'm projecting, and the things and people and places that bother me, you spot it, you got it. So now let's go in, let's do that work. Let's reframe to go back and see what were the parts of my story, of my narrative I've been telling myself all the way up till now. What was I missing? There was something I was missing. Oh, well, there was a wonderful childhood in a lot of ways. Very, very blessed in a lot of ways. Aside from the one or two things that made me respond and react a certain way that helped me frame a narrative around that, which was guilt, shame. I need to get out of this. How do I escape? Aside from that, there was a lot of other components and characters in that play, in Crow's little play at his time in his life, that were wonderful. And I missed them. I missed them from that story piece of my life going forward. So those are the parts that I also had to dig up and be honest with myself. Right. So, um, but I like the part that you were mentioning about projection, Kyle, because that is powerful, especially with clients. When you lay that question on them, because it's not them and it's you. And what this shadow work teaches us all is to own everything. Own everything. It's not somebody, wasn't the day at work that bothered me. It wasn't bad. I did it. And when you come from that perspective, it allows you a reprieve of the old story and the old narrative, that it allows you to separate yourself from your bullshit, is when you take responsibility for everything, right? Your frustration with traffic on your way to work, that's on you. You could have reframed that. It allows you the ability to reframe every minute of every thought, which is incredibly powerful, and it's incredibly healing, and it's incredibly liberating if people would do it. It's not, again, it's not easy doing this. But once you see it, you can't unsee it. That's because it is so freeing.
Mm. Mm.
The other
Alan,
alternative, Kyle,
oh,
to that Dark Knight piece is that the other alternative is that you just spin or ruminate
mm,
and
mhm,
in your own narrative, and you constantly live a life defending that.
mm,
And that is where I think a lot of people in addiction either get it or they don't. They're either going to be brave and courageous enough to go down in there and figure out it was them all along, or they're going to continue to ignore the shadow projection
mhm,
and just continue to be its slave. What did Jung say? Unless we make the unconscious conscious, it will continue to run your life and you will call it fate.
mhm, mhm. Yeah. I was
Is that what?
thinking about what you said, Alan, and I think that you're talking about how people don't ask the right question. You know, they're not walking around with like this, you know, this intrinsic like self-awareness on why am I so messed up right now. And I think that Crow and I have an experience where people are coming into our programs that are broken to a certain extent. You know, they have had some type of upending from like the universe that has led them to the point of understanding that okay, maybe the way that I'm living my life is not working. And a lot of what both of you guys have been talking about is, you know, Bro, you were talking about having to go through that like the initiation, and
Mhm.
I don't think a lot of people go through that process. I think like the issue that, you know, like I mean talking about Alan, you talking about, you know, people kind of being sheep. And I think what ends up happening is that a lot of people are not answering the call. So we're talking I mean we talk a lot about Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey, and um one of the things in there is being willing to pick up that phone when the universe or God or the Buddha or whatever the hell you believe in, whatever is calling you, almost physically calling you and like, hey, like it's time for you to start your adventure, to, you know, so that you can go through this adventure and actually gain like that awareness that we're talking about. I think a lot of people are so comfortable in their complacency that they never pick up that phone. And so they never get to that point of just being aware. And I think that luckily for people in recovery or people that are in mental health recovery, eating disordered recovery, any of these kinds of things, like they're usually brought to that point where they are forced to be like, okay, like what's wrong with me? You know, how do I have to
Mhm.
deal with this? But if I agree that like most people don't ask themselves that question because they're never forced to. You know, like luckily, like for me, like I was forced to ask myself that question. I was almost dead by the end of my, you know, my drug use. And I had to ask myself, like, okay, what did I do in my life to get myself to the point where I'm almost dead at the age of 23? Like that was just like I couldn't
Right.
comprehend that you know, that why had I let myself get to this point where like the I just don't think that most people get to that place. You know, that we had talked a long time ago about the life that people live of that quiet desperation. And I think that a lot of people live in that place of that quiet desperation where they're just complacent with everything in their life and they're okay with it. They're in their comfort zone, and most people live their entire life just being in that little comfort zone, staying in their lane. They work a job that they don't really like. They're in a marriage that's like, yeah, it's okay. They don't drive like a super okay car. I mean, it's almost kind of like a life of mediocrity, and a lot of people are okay with that. And but what that really does is that prevents people from moving to that place of being like extraordinary, of like really digging into your muscles and asking yourself that question of like, why am I so fucked up right now? Like, what am I doing, or what am I doing, or what am I not doing right now in my life that could bring me to like this next level? But and I don't necessarily, I don't know. I almost kind of look at my story as kind of a blessing. Like I look at like the pain that I had to go through in my addiction as like it actually kind of really served me in the end, because I wouldn't have been asking myself this question of what's wrong with me. The last couple of episodes we talk a lot about the shame and stuff that I've been dealing with. If I hadn't gone through the place that I had to go through, I wouldn't be asking myself, I'm like, how is this shame showing up in my life, and how are my expectations showing up? It's like it's kind of a blessing in disguise, a lot of like the negative things. And I think that like I'm fortunate enough to be in that place of being in that redemptive story where I've been able to bring like some awareness or and some lessons and some wisdom from the pain that I've gone through. And it's just so, but I think all of us having gone through that pain and having being the courage that it took all of us to walk through the path that we've walked through, like we know just how difficult it is to walk that path, to have to like really look at yourself in the mirror and examine like everything, every single freckle, every single pimple, every single scar, every single hair follicle, and be like, okay, what the fuck is up, man? What's going on with you? Like it takes so much bravery to even do that in the first place. And I just don't know if like it just I don't know if it's the conditioning of what society's doing, but I feel like a lot of like that. I don't know if just people are not aware of what they're even capable to begin with, and so they we have this society full of a bunch of as you said, sheep, and sheep don't ever stick their head above the crowd. Sheep don't think they're brave. Sheep don't have the courage to be able to go into the lion's den and slay their dragon or do any of that kind of shit. And so
Mhm.
we're at a weird place in our society right now, and I don't necessarily know how to pull us out of that, you know? But
I don't
I don't know.
know if
I don't know.
I think it's society and our culture with the toys. And the thing that's interesting to me is that we have to step back and go, this has been an ongoing saga since the beginning of time. They wrote about this in Greek philosophy. The Romans and the Colosseum. I mean, just let's give people something to numb and keep them drunk and numb them out, and so that they don't look at the big picture of the and we'll take care of all the rules, laws, and legislation while they're drunk, fat, and happy. And so it's always been an ongoing thing. It's just we have more dopamine flying around in this culture today because of the toys, because of technology. And it is so apparent that it is dumbing everyone down, and it is just so prevalent um to escape that. It's so difficult. It's like a mass hypnosis is what the planet is under.
Hmm.
And it's like many are called and fewer are chosen. Um, and that's the big secret. We read years ago, Alan turned me onto this book by Jamie Wheel called Recapture the Rapture. And he asked the exact same questions in that book that were beautiful. What would it take to wake you up? And I don't know about you, Kyle, and I think you're on the same page, is that in addiction recovery, it's to try to bridge the gap to make them understand it's not about staying sober. It's about finding a new life so that sobriety comes as a symptom. If my drinking was a symptom of a much greater problem, well, then how about I find a way to reframe my story moving forward that is so happy, so abundant, so peaceful, so full of joy, that there's no way I want to have anything to do with any toxins or toxic people. No toxic relationships. I want to, I'm willing, and as you guys had alluded to, we got to be to the point to where we are willing to put your life on the line for that, because going back is prison, in your own houses, in your own apartments, in your own head, just completely dislocated from your own body, from nature, creation, community, everybody, your loved ones. So that is hell. That is being shunned, and you're locked out of your own house. And you have to come to the point to where you realize that it's life or death. There is no other way. Otherwise, you will die. And in the hero's journey also, Kyle, there is that one that I point out to clients. There is a stage of it right in between the call and initiation, and it's called the reluctant hero. So ever since the beginning of time, they have had us nailed, us humans, in their storytelling. There always has to be a reluctancy in our hero. Otherwise, it's not worth it. It's just you're doing something relatively easy. There has to be reluctancy, because then what moves and alters that forward is I don't know what my new story is yet, but the flip side of the coin of doubt, I doubt this is going to work. I don't know what's ahead of me, is faith. And so now our hero gets a whole new sense of why I'm doing this, because I have faith in something greater than what I had. I can't see it yet. And I don't know what it's going to be. But what that frees us cognitively from is the mystery of it. And now I'm willing to try to let go. If that makes any sense, right there, is it helps us come to the edge of the abyss. And as Nietzsche said, if you stare into the abyss long enough, the abyss stares back at you. And you have to be almost willing to just turn around and do the free fall. It's such a risky business. And to that point, it reframes our hero moving forward, that I'm going to be willing to do that more and more because the payoff is so much greater.
Do you think that most people that end up in addicted or whatever don't answer the call, and part of the reason they self-medicate is they didn't answer the call and they're just like floundering, and but I mean,
no, that's a great point,
yeah,
Alan.
like,
that's a great.
How many people do you know have answered the call? Honestly, look around the people that you know in the world. Who's like taking that hero's journey? Like nobody.
But
Very few people. Most people are just like,
well,
I go to work, I drive through McDonald's, I go and just shovel shit from one place to another all day. Then I come home, I drive through McDonald's, then I turn on whatever Netflix, and I go to bed. There's nothing heroic in that. That is not her. There, and I would say that's 99% of Americans.
But
And to your point about these things and the dopamine, it's controlled demolition. They're doing it on purpose. They want you to be stupid. Who was it 100 and some years ago that said, "I don't want an educated populace. I just want good workers." They don't want us to think. They don't want us to be
was that
aware.
Ford or
That
Rockefeller?
was Rockefeller, I believe. I don't think they have any desire. The powers that be, whatever you want to call them, have any desire for us to be intelligent, thinking outside of any box that they haven't told us that's the box you get. Right? Like, here's your little box. Sit in it until you die, and then we're going to do, it's like there was a Jam song back in the day where he's talking about getting replaced at work, some employee, and he goes, you're the same as him. You're like tits or knees, everyone, they're all the same, right? So it's just this plug and play system where they're just going to find, this little conveyor belt of flesh that they put in a little box that does their bidding and doesn't ask a question, doesn't answer the call, and then they die, and they throw that into the pile and it gets ground up, and the next one comes in. And I think that's the biggest problem, is getting off that wheel, and maybe it is answering the call, but I don't know, man. I don't even know if that little box has a phone in it for you to answer. I
It,
think that
it, it it's all a wheel of samsara. And the Vedics say that that's, after we pass from this world, but I think it's here right now, as will be in the next stage when we pass away. But you said something really good about, do you think, and you asked Kyle and I this, and Kyle, I'm going to throw it at you because I don't know. I've asked this question to my clients. How many of you have drank, used, fell into any mind-numbing addictive behavior? I don't care what it is, because you know deep down in your bones you're capable of more, but you don't know how to go get it, and you're afraid of yourself if you achieved it, because it would be so powerful. It would be so great.
well, do you think
And but it's fear.
is
It's
yeah,
fear.
is it the fear of success or the fear of failure? Right?
They're both the
Both.
same thing.
Yeah, because
Two sides
well,
of the same
potentially,
coin.
yeah, maybe two sides of the same coin.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's easy. Entropy is easy. Staying at the lowest state is easy. Like raising your vibration, taking the call. I mean, we took the call when we decided we wanted to play music years ago, but we really didn't do the
Yeah.
journey. We answered the phone, we started the journey, and then it got, whatever. We got into the abyss and it just fell apart because, well, A, you're relying on other people, but B, it's a hard thing to do. That was hard to do, to go to the next level, right? And I think that's the thing. Like, you can take the call and say, all right, here's what I want to do, and I feel fulfillment from it, but it's really hard. And if and this is goes back to the everyone being chickens, or sheep, is as soon as the journey gets challenging, they stop.
Yes.
And we talked
Yes.
about that years ago on being on the path and laying down until someone comes and picks you up, right? Because the path is hard. And even the worn path can be hard, but when you go and do your own path, it's exceptionally hard. And you've got expectations. And, it's like there's this movie playing out. Your screen, you're watching this movie, and you want the audience to be happy, right? You don't care. You should be the director and not and not worry about the audience. Say, this is my vision. I'm doing this, but then you hear the critics, be they your family, friends, even yourself, your self-doubt saying,
Yeah.
well, do you really want to do that? You might fail, you might end up this or that. So, yeah,
It's
I mean,
fear.
it is fear, but I really think that it's very hard to simplify something that's as complex and truncated as these things that we discuss. Like,
Oh, it's
if there
very.
was an easy solution, obviously there would be the easy solution. But sometimes I think that it's, I mean, I think it all goes back to just the modern world. And I don't think it's just our society. I know that it's easy because we're in it to make fun of it. I just think it's Western society. But you look at a lot of the other parts of the world, and I'm like, well, I'd rather be in this dung pile than those dung piles, you know? Like, you don't even have a chance if you got the call, because you're some guy's lady boy or whatever they do in Afghanistan to the little boys. It's disgusting, So I, I, so I think that hey, it goes back to being soft. Like people just don't want to take the risk, take the chance of getting out of their little tiny world.
Mhm,
So,
mhm.
um, so there you have that. There's my rant. And I want to go circle back to a few weeks ago when we were talking about mindfulness versus watchfulness. I seriously have thought about this for 2 weeks every day. So here's
Mm.
I think where we're going to delineate the two. So watchfulness to me is like in the Wile E. Coyote cartoon with the sheepdog that comes and looks over the flock, and he's always so to me watchfulness is being vigilant and watching over the flock, right? Whereas mindfulness is more like your dog laying on the couch eating up chewing on a bone, and then someone knocks at the door and he reacts. So it's not um, a constant vigilant state. So I think that that's where, because at one point we were kind of thinking they were very similar, but I don't think that they're really that similar. I think that watchfulness is much more active. And I think if you're being watchful, it would be hard to be mindful because you're using so much of your energy to um, just be on the lookout for things. Whereas when you're mindful, you're just like, well, here it is, there it is, it's gone, you know. Does that
Mm.
make sense?
Yeah. I
Yeah,
think I
yeah.
think if I could reframe what you just said in my head, and let's see if we're aligned, is like let's say I am doing this, I'm in the middle amidst, which I always am, of my shadow work on a day-to-day basis because I spend so much time alone in solitude. I'm watchful of my thoughts. And if a negative thought pops up about somebody in my head or something to divert and throw my day off and throw me into a funk, I'm mindful to change it. Like, okay, I just caught that. Like, well, what just happened, man? 3 minutes ago, I was in a great mood. Now I'm all of a sudden, I thought about this person and I'm in a funk. Watchfulness says, I'm watching. I caught myself. So I'm being watchful, but then mindful is the ability to reframe, maybe. I'm trying to bring it
I
into
don't
this
know. I don't
context
know.
of me doing
I still think that it's
it's
um
more watchfulness is more
watchfulness is
active.
very active. And I think that like
Okay.
to
Okay.
meditate, I don't think you could meditate and be watchful at the same time because you're using your brain to be vigilant to keep the thoughts out.
Okay.
Whereas
Okay.
mindfulness is the thought comes in, you become aware of it, but you're not looking for it. Like to me, watchfulness is like a looking, like I'm looking for this, I'm looking for this,
Oh,
I'm looking, I'm for threats or
yes.
whatever.
Okay.
Does that so no, then maybe I'm completely wrong, but that's just kind of what hit me after we did that last podcast and discussed that. So I just had to get it out of me so I didn't have to think about it anymore. So
Yeah,
does
I
that
do
make sense?
appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
It's to be more aware in watchfulness.
Right. Right. Well, it's like vigilant, it's like a sentry. Instead of
Yes.
passive, like, you're waiting there for the Chi-Coms to come rolling up the hill. So you're the sentry waiting, and
So it's almost like one is an energy that watches for what comes in, the other is a sensory to let go, to release, the allowance to let go.
yeah, I guess you could put it that way. But, like for
Okay.
me, because I tried to meditate and be watchful, and I'm like, well, you can't really be both because you're so concerned about keeping the thoughts away. Whereas when I just sit there and meditate and then the thought comes and I become mindful of it and say, okay, there it is, instead of saying, is a thought coming? Is a thought coming? Is a
Because
thought coming?
because the watchfulness involves me creating a story about it.
Yeah, potentially. Yeah, I guess you
Yeah.
could say that. Yeah.
To reframe a narrative of some kind to make sense of it or challenge the thought. Whereas mindfulness, I need to let go of all of it and allow just nothing.
Not yeah. So watchful, I think mindfulness is being there's nothing until there's something, and then you're mindful of it.
Right.
Whereas watchfulness is it's not nothing, it's something. So
It's something.
anyhow,
Yeah.
there you go.
Kyle, what
I like it.
what other thoughts have you gotten on shadow that you to add to this?
I don't know. I
Or
think
did we
we've
just about
covered like co- I think we've kind of covered quite a bit of it. I will say that we it's really easy to come in and have a conversation about some of this stuff, and I think putting a lot of this stuff into practice is very, very different. And I do think that it is I think it is highly subjective to, a lot of these are very, very advanced topics. And it is for any of the listeners, be easy on yourself when you start getting through this. If you've discovered this podcast in the first place, I mean, there's a reason for it. I do kind of believe in law of attraction, and I think that if you stumbled into this kind of work and you're curious about it and you're starting to pick scabs and you're starting to ask yourself those questions, be easy on yourself, give yourself some grace. And I think that grace component is some self-compassion along with some responsibility and some accountability in there. So, be able to hold yourself accountable, but also give yourself a little bit of love while you're going through some of this work, because it is very messy. It is it, I mean, one of the obstacles that we were talking about today is because it is so challenging. I think that challenge scares people away. And so we're talking about people not picking up that phone. Like, I get it. I understand why people choose to kind of live in like their mediocrity and their comfortability, because like I've picked up the phone and it sucked most of the time. It really did. But it led me to a place that I couldn't have imagined. It led me to a level of like bliss and contentment and serenity, and I guess like true happiness that like I couldn't have gotten to this place if I hadn't have gone into the woods, into the dark cave, slayed the dragon. But I understand why people don't do it. I get it. You have a lot of mountains to climb. You're gonna build a lot of calluses and blisters on your feet and your hands and every. I mean, it's a rough road. I will try to link this. We're gonna link this video, the videos that we've kind of referenced in the description, because this Modern Intuitionist does a fantastic job of breaking it down, and I do think that cinema is a great teaching tool, because you get to see how a lot of these things that we're talking about actually look on screen, which is for me is just, makes so much sense. But I would highly encourage any of the listeners to go check out these videos. They are, they're only about 20-30 minutes long or something like that, but they're highly entertaining and makes a lot of sense. And then it's one of those things that like once you see it, you can't unsee it at that point. So you kind of, you kind of know too much at that point, but it's definitely worth checking into. But yeah, I think It's a complex
The
topic, and I think we, you know,
but you said something really cool right there about watching those as learning and educational tools, because when you do watch these that are the synopsis of the movie and they break it down for you, the mere fact that you're learning about what the movie was about and you're watching this, it, it freaks a lot of our clients out, because the light bulb goes off that says, holy crap, there was layers in when I was sitting in that theater and watched the entire movie, and I was simply entertained, and I missed the entire crux, the underlying meaning of what they were trying to get me to do and tell me. And if that was the case, then what am I missing somewhere else? What am I missing in everyday life? So it really helps clients go, wow, to even open up their trajectory and just go, if I was missing that and it was just a entertainment, then how could that have gotten by me? And so it forces them to start orienting the way they're processing thoughts. It's like, yeah, it's hiding in plain sight is really what it comes down to. And when they get that thing, and also lastly, to your point, when you were talking to our listeners about this work, it is not easy. But the main point that I'm always trying to emphasize to all of our clients is this is where we dip into the past, we study it, and then we close the door and we come back. And so there's this toggling. We don't want people, in the Freudian psychological sense, to go back, and just stay there and ruminate and identify with. It's a process of dipping your toe in, studying you, and then coming back to present day to reframe, in order to reframe your story. It's not a matter of dipping into your past, and shadow work is not dipping back and then identifying and staying in that room. This is what we need clarity on this, because a lot of folks will just keep talking about the past, talking about it, and before you know it, they're spinning in victimhood again and ruminating in that accidentally. So we need to be very wary of that when you're doing that work. Yeah. Good one, Kyle.
Yeah, Kyle. Well, I bought a book, shadow workbook thing, and I'm gonna do it over the next. Well, I have to finish something else first, and then we'll come back, since and we'll have a discussion again about this in the future. Yeah, I think that would be good.
I like it.
It's. I mean, I get the gist of it, but I'd like to be a little more knowledgeable. So.
Well, there's a lot of them on Amazon that are really, really good anymore. So I would encourage our listeners to also reach out to that. And maybe, Kyle, you can put a link to some of your um, requests on that, some of your, what you would suggest, rather.
Yeah, for sure. Nice. All right, so what are you guys grateful for?
Go ahead, Crow.
Health, friends, you guys, always, and how nice the weather has been. This is amazing. I love sunlight. I'm a sun dude. I gotta have it. And we have been blessed this season here in Colorado with so long of a sunny season, and I just love it. Yeah. So, there it is, nature, you guys, and and my health, man.
Mm.
There's my 3.
Nice.
All
Nice,
right, well, I'll
nice.
go. Every morning I get up and I look at the sunrise, and I'm really grateful for the sun, even though it's going to kill us eventually. Um, it really is. It's going to screw us so hard. But I get out there and I'm like, "Hey, buddy, how you doing today? And thank you for keeping us alive." And I'm thankful for some of my little buddies, online buddies in the low carb community, because they convinced me to start my New Year's resolution yesterday instead of next month, so I can stop being such a fat boy, um, um, and get back on clean living and exercising. So I'm grateful that there's people who, motivate you to become better, which you guys are
Yeah.
both in that little circle. Um, and I'm grateful for Alan Watts. I've been listening to him a lot lately. And there was a thingy today that I watched and that brought up about how I'll have to find it again, but basically you're born into dysfunctional families for a reason. And it was pretty
Mm-hmm.
fascinating. So maybe we can
Yeah.
all listen to it someday and have a discussion on it. I mean, he's an interesting guy. I mean, it's kind of sad that he got drunk and fell off a cliff and died, because that tells me he wasn't quite as enlightened as he thought he was. If he's getting drunk, and then deciding to walk off a cliff accidentally or whatever. But so those are my 3 things. I'm glad for my circle, and my circle is small by choice. I think I sent Crow something about that. It may have been Alan Watts even too, talking about how,
Yeah.
as you get less and less willing to deal with crap, your circle gets smaller and smaller, and that makes you dangerous.
Yeah.
I'm dangerous.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
anyhow.
I like it. I like it. Okay, I'm grateful to live in Savannah, Georgia. My wife and I were getting to a place where we were kind of starting to be a little bit resentful towards where we live, and we realized, because we went out and spent some time on the town, which is a really really cool place. There's some cool cobblestone places, and you're walking down by the river, and there's palm trees and all, like, very cool place. But we realized that we had gotten to this place of we we go to work and then we come home. We go to work and then we come home. And so our experience of where we live was work and home. And so we realized that, like, oh, like, we actually live in a really cool place. We just need to get the fuck out of our house every once in a while, but it kind of, I don't know, my appreciation for where I live and my gratitude for where I live, I think just it reignited, the last couple of days. So very excited about that. Very grateful for that. I am grateful. I love doing this podcast. I really do. I love being able to bring in these topics that are, like I said, challenging to be able to master, or to be able to even comprehend sometimes, but to be able to bounce these complex ideas off of each other and have I think a relatively productive discussion about all of them. And it's just a blast. I love doing this. And I think that this perfectly aligns with, like, my bliss, because this is the kind of stuff that I like talking about, and this is what I do for a living, and might as well, be doing a podcast about it too. I love this kind of stuff. And I am also grateful. I'm really grateful for my health. Like, I take it for granted sometimes, but I haven't really had any health issues in a very long time. And I mean, mental or physical, and it's been years. And sometimes I just take it for granted when I wake up and I don't have any pain anywhere, and it's just, I am grateful that I'm healthy, for the most part right now. So
Yeah.
that's good. But thank
Nice.
you, gentlemen, for all of your input today. Yeah, I think we had I think that was a good discussion. And everyone else, I mean, just make sure that you tune into the next episode.